My dears, I want to tell you something tonight that still makes my hands tremble whenever I think about it. You see, everyone thinks growing old is about knitting sweaters, sipping tea by the fireplace, and quietly fading away in a cozy English house. But let me tell you, the walls of this house have heard screams no one else will ever hear. The floors have carried secrets too heavy for even stone to bear. And the worst betrayal didn't come from strangers. It came from family. It came from the very woman I welcomed into my home with open arms. My daughter-in-law. She thought I was too old, too weak, too blind to see what she was doing. But I saw, I felt, and I survived. If you're listening, my darlings, don't you ever underestimate a grandmother's eyes. They may be tired, but they see everything. Now, before I go on, let me pause here, because I know many of you watching are shaking your heads, whispering, "Oh, Granny, how could this happen to you?" My loves, it happened because I trusted too much. And trust is the sweetest poison of all. But let me ask you, would you have seen through the smile of someone you loved? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know if I was foolish, or if anyone else would have believed the mask she wore. It all began after my son, William, brought her home. Her name was Clara. Oh, Clara. With her porcelain face, her soft laugh, her delicate way of setting teacups on saucers, as if she were born in a royal palace. My neighbors adored her instantly. "Your son has found a gem," they would say. "A gem. Ha ha." Gems glitter brightly, my loves, but some are nothing more than shards of glass meant to cut. She moved into my old English house, the one with ivy crawling up the walls, and the creaking stairs that groan like tired bones at night. My husband built this house with his own hands before he passed. Every stone, every brick, carried his sweat and love, and it was here that Clara began weaving her web. At first, it was subtle. She would insist I let her cook dinner, saying, "You need your rest, mother." She would bring me tea before bed, her smile wide, her hands gentle. "You've done enough in your life. Let me take care of you now." Oh, how sweet it all seemed. But sweetness, my dears, is sometimes the taste of death dressed in honey. The first night I grew suspicious was a stormy evening. I remember it so clearly. The rain rattled against the windows, and I sat by the fireplace, my knitting needles clicking slowly. Clara brought me soup, tomato, my favorite. But when I lifted the spoon to my lips, something felt wrong. The smell was sharp, metallic, though faint, like rust hidden beneath roses. I hesitated, and then, as though the house itself wanted to warn me, the old grandfather clock in the hall chimed. But it wasn't midnight. No, it was only 9. The clock had never chimed at the wrong time before. My hand shook. The spoon clattered into the bowl, and I didn't eat. Clara's eyes flickered then, just for a second. Annoyance, anger, a shadow she quickly buried beneath a smile. "Not hungry, mother? Shall I make you something else?" I forced a smile, placed my hand on hers, and said softly, "No, dear, I'll just have some bread." That night, while the storm howled outside, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams. My husband's voice seemed to whisper in the crackle of the firewood. "Watch her. Don't close your eyes too soon." I shivered, clutching the blanket close. The next morning, I pretended nothing was wrong, but I watched, and listening closely to me now, my dears. I want you to understand, sometimes silence is louder than words. Sometimes pretending you don't know is the only way to survive long enough to learn the truth. If you believe that too, give this story a like, because I need to know my precious listeners are as sharp as I tried to be. Days turned into weeks. Clara grew bolder. She would pour my tea without asking, stir it quickly, and place it in front of me with a forced sweetness in her tone. I noticed she never drank from the same pot. Always she had her own cup, already prepared before she came to sit with me. One afternoon, while dusting the shelves in the kitchen, I found a small vial behind the flour tin, a tiny bottle with no label. The liquid inside was pale, almost clear, but thick. When I tilted it, my heart stopped. I knew poison when I saw it. My husband, God rest his soul, was once a gardener who had to keep dangerous things locked away from the plants and pests. That smell, bitter almond, sharp, cutting, it was unmistakable. Cyanide. My hands trembled so violently, the bottle nearly slipped. I heard footsteps. Quickly, I shoved it back, dust flying as I closed the cupboard. Clara entered, her smile wide, her eyes too bright. "Mother, are you hungry?" "I was thinking of making stew tonight." I nodded weakly, my mouth dry. That night, I didn't touch the stew. I claimed I had a headache and went to bed early. But I listened. Oh, I listened through the thin walls. Clara's voice was sharp when she spoke to my son. "She barely eats anymore, William. She's wasting away." And my son, my sweet, blind son, only sighed. "She's old, Clara. That's what happens." No, my dears. That is not what happens. That is what a predator wants you to believe. The days grew darker. My body weakened, not from poison. I was careful now, eating only bread, milk, and fruit I picked myself. But from fear. Fear eats at the bones faster than any toxin. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every cup placed before me felt like a test. And then came the night when the truth nearly took me to the grave. It was a quiet evening. Too quiet. My son had gone on a business trip, leaving Clara and me alone in the house. She made tea, as usual, and carried it to me on a silver tray. The fire burned low, casting shadows on the walls that looked like reaching hands. She set the cup before me, her smile steady, but her eyes glinting with something cold. "Drink, mother," she whispered, almost too softly. I stared at the cup, steam curling like fingers reaching for my throat. My heart pounded. I lifted the cup, pretending to sip, letting the liquid brush my lips, but not pass through. And then, with a trembling smile, I set it down. "Oh dear, I'm so clumsy," I said. And with one swift motion, I let the cup slip. It fell to the carpet, spilling its contents. And there it was. The smell? Sharp, unmistakable, bitter almonds. Her mask broke. For just a heartbeat, her eyes hardened. Her lips pressed thin, and her hands curled into fists. She thought I was too blind, too frail to notice, but I saw it all. I clutched my shawl tighter around me, praying silently. That night, I locked my door for the first time in years. I sat on the bed, rocking back and forth, whispering to myself, "Hold on, just hold on." And now, my loves, I need you to hold on too. This story is only beginning. What Clara planned for me, what she thought she could steal, and how it all backfired. Oh, it will chill your bones. If you're still with me, don't forget to subscribe, because the next part of this story is darker, sharper, and far more dangerous than anything I've told you yet. But before I continue, tell me, have you ever felt danger right beside you but couldn't speak it out loud? Comment below, because I want to know if you'd have had the courage to play along as I did, pretending not to see, while death sat across the table smiling at you. The morning after that poisoned cup, I woke with the heavy weight of dread pressing against my chest. The house was silent, too silent, the kind of silence that presses into your ears, until you hear your own heartbeat, thudding like a drum. I didn't dare open my bedroom door at first. My fingers clutched the brass handle but froze. What if she was standing there in the hallway, waiting for me? What if she had the vial ready in her hand? I sat back down on the edge of my bed, whispering prayers under my breath. My hands shook as I traced the rosary beads my mother gave me when I was a little girl. "Protect me," I begged. "Keep me alive long enough to see justice." When I finally did open the door, Clara was already in the kitchen, humming a cheerful tune. Too cheerful. She was baking bread, flour dusting her pale hands. She looked up, her eyes glimmering with false warmth. "Good morning, Mother," she said. "I made your favorite." My stomach twisted. Bread. She knew I had been surviving on bread. The one thing I thought safe. I glanced at the loaf cooling on the counter, its crust golden, its smell filling the air. My mouth watered with hunger, but my throat clenched shut. What had she put inside? I forced a smile. "Lovely, dear, but I think I'll just have some fruit from the garden today. Fresh air will do me good." Her smile faltered for just an instant, but she quickly regained it. "Of course, Mother, as you wish." I walked out into the garden. The damp grass cool beneath my slippers. The ivy climbing the stone walls whispered in the breeze, as though trying to warn me. I picked an apple from the old tree at the back, the same tree William used to climb when he was a boy. My hands trembled as I bit into it, juice running down my chin. It was real. It was safe. It was mine. As I chewed, tears pricked my eyes. How had it come to this? My own daughter-in-law, trying to end me in my own home. And for what? Money? Inheritance? Did she not know that I would have given her the world if she had only loved me as a daughter should? That night, I couldn't sleep. The shadows on the walls looked like claws, reaching, grabbing. Every sound made my heart leap. At one point, I swore I heard my late husband's voice whisper, "Be careful, she's not done yet." I sat upright, clutching the blanket, listening. Nothing but the creak of the old beams. Still, I knew he was right. The following week, the poison returned. This time, it was in the stew. She ladled it into my bowl, her hand steady, her smile unwavering. But I was ready. I took one spoonful, pretended to swallow, then coughed delicately into my napkin, spitting it out unseen. The smell was there again, faint but sharp, hiding beneath the herbs and meat. She watched me closely, her eyes narrowing. "Is it not to your taste, Mother?" she asked softly. I shook my head. "My stomach is weak these days, dear. I think I'll have only water." For a moment, her mask slipped again. A flicker of rage danced across her features, but she smoothed it over with a smile, nodding gently. I knew then that it wasn't just my imagination. She was trying over and over to end me. But my dears, the part that cut me deepest wasn't the poison. It was what I overheard one night when the house slept. I had crept down the hallway to fetch a blanket from the linen cupboard when I heard voices drifting up from the sitting room. Clara and her friend. Yes, she had invited one of her sly companions over, thinking I was fast asleep. "She'll be gone soon," Clara whispered. "She's frail. William will inherit everything. And then, well, everything will be mine," her friend giggled softly. "Are you sure it will work? She seems stronger than she looks." "Oh, trust me," Clara hissed. "She doesn't have long. She's too weak to fight back." I froze in the hallway, clutching the blanket so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart hammered in my chest. To hear her speak of me that way, as if I were already a ghost, it tore something inside me. I wanted to scream, to march into that room and throw her out of my house. But I couldn't, not yet. To act too soon would mean danger. I had to be clever. I had to wait, and that, my loves, is where I need to pause and ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have confronted her right then, shouted to the world what she was doing? Or would you, like me, bide your time, waiting for the moment when her own plan would crumble around her? Tell me in the comments, because I want to know if I was right to stay silent a little longer. Days turned into nights, and my body grew weaker, not from poison, but from exhaustion, from fear, from the weight of carrying this terrible secret alone. My son came home briefly from his business trip, and oh, how I longed to tell him everything. But every time I tried, Clara's eyes would find mine, cold and warning. She held him in her grasp, my poor William. He looked at her as though she hung the moon. And me? I was just the shadow in the corner. But then came the moment her plan began to backfire. It happened on a Sunday evening. The church bells had just finished ringing, echoing across the fields. Clara insisted on making tea again. She poured 2 cups from the same pot this time. Perhaps to ease my suspicion, she set one before me and one before herself. "Drink with me, mother," she said sweetly. Her eyes watched me carefully as she lifted her own cup, sipping gracefully. My heart pounded. Was this real? Had she grown tired of her game? Or was this another trick, a way to prove her innocence? I raised the cup, let the steam brush against my face, and then I noticed it. Her hand, trembling ever so slightly as she lowered the cup. She had not swallowed. Her lips had only touched the rim. I smiled faintly, set my cup down untouched, and folded my hands in my lap. "I think I'll save it for later," I said softly. Her smile froze. Her eyes flickered, and for the first time I saw it, the fear. She was afraid that I knew, and oh my darlings, there is nothing more dangerous than a guilty person who realizes their secret is no longer safe. That night, I lay awake listening to the creak of the stairs. I heard her footsteps outside my door, pausing, waiting. I held my breath, clutching a heavy candlestick in my hand, ready to defend myself if she dared enter. But after a long silence, the footsteps retreated. The next morning, she was all sweetness again. She made breakfast. She kissed my son's cheek. She even tried to comb my hair like a dutiful daughter. But I knew, I knew the truth behind her smile. And so, my dears, I began to plan. If she thought me weak, frail, blind, then let her believe it. Let her underestimate me. Let her walk into her own trap. Because you see, I wasn't just going to survive her poison. I was going to make sure her greed destroyed her in front of everyone she had fooled. But how I did it, oh, that, my loves, is a tale you must not miss. If you're still listening, if your heart is pounding like mine did in those nights of terror, then don't forget to subscribe, because the next part will reveal how I turned her wicked plan into her downfall. And before we move on, I want you to share this story with someone you love. Tell them never to trust a smile too easily, never to ignore the whispers of their heart when danger sits too close. Now breathe with me, my dears. The storm is only beginning. I must confess something, my loves. After those nights of fear, after the clinking cups and the trembling spoons, I realized something strange. I was no longer just afraid of Clara. No, I was growing angry. Anger is a fire that old age cannot smother. It may burn slower in brittle bones, but when it catches, it can blaze brighter than youth itself. She thought me weak. A shadow fading in an English house that smelled of damp books and dusted roses. She thought the creaking of the stairs meant I was too tired to rise. She thought my cloudy eyes could no longer see her pouring death into my teacup. But she was wrong, and that mistake, my dears, would become her undoing. I remember sitting in the parlor one quiet afternoon, my knitting basket at my feet, watching her from the corner of my eye. She dusted the shelves, humming that same artificial tune she always hummed when she wanted to appear harmless. My son William was at work, his laughter and trust miles away, leaving me alone in this house of shadows with the serpent he married. As she dusted, I saw her pause at the cabinet where my husband kept his ledgers and documents. She ran her fingers along the drawer, almost caressing it, before quickly turning away. She thought I hadn't noticed, but oh my loves, I saw. Her greed wasn't only for my life, it was for what my life would leave behind. The inheritance, the house, everything my husband and I built with years of sweat and sacrifice. That evening, I decided to act, slowly, carefully. the way an old cat might stalk a rat. You see, she wasn't the only one who knew how to play games. The next morning, I called William into the parlor. "Son," I said softly, my voice quivering with the weight of years. "I was thinking, perhaps it is time I put my affairs in order." Clara's head snapped up from the kitchen doorway. Oh, I can still see it. How her eyes widened. How her lips parted just slightly, her breath catching in her throat. But William dear, foolish William, only nodded. "If it makes you feel better, Mother," I smiled weakly, patting his hand. "Yes, my love. Better safe than sorry, isn't it? We never know when our time may come." I could feel Clara's stare burning into me. She thought she had won. She thought her plan was working. And oh, how sweet it was to let her believe it. Now, my darlings, let me pause here. If you're listening, if you're holding your breath as I did in those days, I need you to understand, sometimes, to defeat evil, you must let it believe it is winning. Do you agree with me? Tell me in the comments, because I wonder if you would have had the patience to play such a dangerous game. That week, Clara grew bold, too bold. She began hovering closer when I ate, watching every bite. She poured my drinks with a hand too eager, her smile stretching wider each day. And at night, I heard her whispering on the telephone when she thought I was asleep. "It won't be long now," she hissed into the receiver. "Soon it will all be ours." But the house, my loves, the house has ears. The walls carried her whispers straight to me. One evening, I sat in the drawing room, pretending to nod off in my chair while she arranged the tea tray. My eyes were half closed, but I watched her carefully. Her back to me, she pulled that small vial from her pocket. She uncorked it quickly, tipping the liquid into my cup. The smell reached me, faint but clear. Bitter almonds, sharp and cruel. She stirred quickly, set the spoon down, and turned with that false, sugary smile. "Mother," she cooed, "your tea is ready." I let my head loll, as though I were barely awake. I reached for the cup with trembling hands. But just as she expected me to drink, I fumbled deliberately. The cup spilled across my lap, hot liquid soaking my dress. I gasped, clutching at my skirts. "Oh dear me, how clumsy I am," I whispered. Her mask cracked. For 1 second, just one, her eyes blazed with fury. But she quickly dropped to her knees, fussing with a cloth, dabbing at my dress. "Oh, Mother, don't worry, don't worry. Accidents happen. Accidents." Ha! If only she knew what accident awaited her. That night, as the wind rattled the ivy against the windows, I sat alone in my room, the candlelight flickering. I pulled out my old leather journal, the one I had kept since my youth. My hand shook as I began to write everything down. Every smell, every poisoned sip, every overheard whisper. I knew my words might one day be the only voice left to speak the truth, if she succeeded. But no, I wasn't going to let her succeed. The next morning, I went to the solicitor's office in the village. My cane tapped against the cobblestones as I walked, my heart heavy but determined. Inside, I sat across from the old solicitor, Mr. Harding, a kind man with spectacles that slid down his nose. "I want to change my will," I said quietly. He looked surprised. "Oh, and how so, Mrs. Whitmore?" I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "I want everything I own, to go to charity, unless my son inherits it directly. Not his wife, not her family, only my son. And if my son does not survive me, then it goes to the orphanage." Mr. Harding blinked. "Are you sure?" I nodded firmly. "Quite sure. And oh, my loves, if you could have seen Clara's face when I returned home with the papers. I left them on the hall table deliberately, just long enough for her to see the seal. She picked them up, her hands trembling slightly. And when she saw what they were, her skin turned pale as milk. That evening, her voice was sharp with William. I heard them through the walls again. "She's changing everything. If she signs that will, I'll get nothing." "Clara," William said gently, "why are you so concerned? It's my mother's decision. "You don't understand," she snapped. "She's doing this to spite me." My son only sighed, tired and blind. But I, in my room, smiled. The snake had been cornered. She thought she could outwit me, but her greed had blinded her. Now, my loves, here is where the story turns darker. For when Clara realized her plan might slip through her fingers, she grew desperate. And desperation makes even the clever stumble. The next night, I found the vial again. This time, it was not hidden in the kitchen. No, it was tucked into the pocket of my coat in the hallway, as though she wanted me to find it. Or perhaps she planned to say it was mine all along, that I had poisoned myself. I held the vial in my wrinkled hand, the liquid swirling like death itself. My heart pounded as I realized she was changing her game, no longer content to slip poison quietly. She was preparing to make me look mad, or worse, suicidal. I placed the vial carefully in a box and locked it in my drawer. I would keep it as proof, as a weapon for when the time came. And oh, my darlings, that time was drawing near. But let me ask you now, what would you have done with that vial? Would you have shown it to William, knowing he might not believe? Or kept it close, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal her? Comment below, because I wonder if your patience would have lasted as long as mine. The shadows grew longer in the house. Clara's steps grew sharper, her eyes colder. She hovered constantly, watching me eat, watching me drink, her smile stretched too thin. But I played my role. I coughed weakly. I pretended to nap in my chair. I let her think the poison was working. And all the while, I waited. Waited for her to take one step too far. And my loves, she did. The days that followed felt like walking across thin ice. My loves, every step dangerous, every breath uncertain. Clara was changing. I could feel it in the air, in the way her footsteps no longer echoed gently through the hallways, but snapped like a whip. Her eyes lingered on me too long. Her smile stretched until they looked like cracks in porcelain. She had seen the papers. She knew the inheritance was slipping from her fingers, like water through a sieve. And greed, my darlings, greed does not forgive. It claws, it gnashes, it strikes. One night, when the house lay silent and the moonlight painted the walls silver, I heard her outside my bedroom door. Her breath was shallow, almost ragged. I held my candlestick close, my heart pounding. Then came the sound, the slow, careful twist of the doorknob. My breath caught in my throat, but the lock held. The knob rattled once, twice, then silence. After a long moment, her footsteps crept away. I sat awake until dawn, my body aching, my eyes raw with sleeplessness. I knew it then. She was no longer content with waiting for poison to do its slow work. She was ready to finish it. The following morning, I played my part. I shuffled into the kitchen, my shoulders slumped, my voice weak. "Clara, dear," I whispered, "I think my time is near. I don't feel strong anymore." Oh, the way her eyes lit up, though she tried to mask it. She pressed her hand to her chest, feigning sorrow. "Oh, mother, don't say such things. You'll be with us for many years." But her smile betrayed her. She believed victory was close. That afternoon, while she busied herself in the kitchen, I slipped into her room. My old bones creaked, my fingers shook, but determination steadied me. I opened her drawer, and there it was. Letters, banknotes, and a small notebook filled with her handwriting. Plans, my loves, detailed notes of my routines, my meals, even how much sugar I liked in my tea. And at the bottom of one page, scrawled in hurried ink, "When she is gone, William will inherit the house. Everything will finally be mine." My blood ran cold. But also I smiled, because this was the rope she had woven to hang herself. I took the notebook and slipped it into my apron. Then, with slow steps, I returned to my room. That night, I tucked it beneath my pillow, whispering a silent prayer of thanks. Now, my darlings, let me pause here to ask you something. If you found such proof, tangible, undeniable proof, would you run to your loved one at once? Or would you wait for the perfect moment when the guilty could no longer deny it? Tell me in the comments, because I want to know if your heart would have been patient, or if fear would have driven you too soon. The storm broke 2 days later. Quite literally, rain lashed against the windows, wind howled through the cracks of the old house, and thunder shook the beams above. I sat by the fireplace, a shawl wrapped tightly around my shoulders, knitting needles clicking as though to mask the sound of my pounding heart. Clara entered with a tray of tea. Her movements were too careful, too deliberate. She set the tray down, poured the tea, stirred slowly. I watched her hand slip into her pocket, watched her tilt the vial over my cup. Just a drop, but enough to silence me forever. She turned to me, her face glowing with false kindness. Here you are, mother, a warm cup to keep out the storm. I took the cup, my hands trembling, not from weakness, but from the weight of what I was about to do. I raised it to my lips, pretending to sip. She leaned forward, her eyes hungry, watching, waiting. And then, my loves, I coughed violently, clutching my chest. I let the cup slip, spilling its contents across the rug. My body shook, as though in seizure, my breath coming in short gasps. Clara gasped too, rushing forward, but not in panic, in anticipation. "It's happening," she whispered. Finally, but what she did not know, what she could never have imagined, was that William had come home early. The storm had forced his trip to end sooner, and he had stepped quietly through the door just moments before. He stood in the hallway now, watching as his wife bent over me, with eyes gleaming like a vulture's. "Finally what, Clara?" His voice cut through the air like a knife. Clara froze. Her head whipped around, her face drained of color. "William, I was just..." "She's not well." But William's eyes had already fallen on the spilled tea, the bitter almond scent curling through the air. He looked at me, his face pale with realization, and then I, trembling but steady, pulled the notebook from beneath my shawl and handed it to him. "Read," I whispered. His hands shook as he opened the pages, his eyes scanning the words. The silence in the room was louder than thunder. When he looked up, tears burned in his eyes. "Clara, what have you done?" Clara stammered, her words tumbling over themselves. "She's lying. She's manipulating you, William. She's old. She's confused. But my son silenced her with a raised hand. "Enough. And oh, my loves, I cannot describe the look on her face then. The mask shattering, the serpent revealed. Her lips twisted, her eyes flashed with fury. You would believe her over me? You would throw me away for this? This hag?" William's voice broke, but it was firm. "She is my mother." The storm outside wailed. The wind rattled the windows, as though the house itself cried with me. My hands shook as I reached for William, tears spilling down my cheeks. For the first time in so long, I felt safe, seen, believed. Clara, realizing her game was over, screamed in rage and fled the room. The front door slammed so hard the glass rattled in its frame. The storm swallowed her, her footsteps fading into the night, and my loves, that is how her plan began to backfire. The poison she meant for me had poisoned her own marriage, her own life, for greed always consumes itself in the end. Now, my dear listeners, I know your hearts must be racing, your hands clenched as mine were that night. If you've listened this far, don't forget to like this story and share it, so others may learn never to underestimate a grandmother's eyes, never to dismiss the whispers of danger. But listen closely, for this tale is not yet finished. What happened after Clara fled, how justice finally found her, and how the house itself seemed to breathe again once she was gone. Oh, that part of the story will chill your bones even more. So subscribe, my darlings, because the storm may have broken, but the calm that followed was not the end. It was only the beginning. The house felt different after that storm, my darlings. The air itself seemed lighter, though shadows still lingered in the corners, like old ghosts. William had stayed by my side that entire night, his hand gripping mine, his eyes filled with shame and sorrow. More than once, I saw him wipe away tears when he thought I was asleep. But Clara was not gone for good. The serpent never slithers away so easily. The very next morning, she returned, soaked to the bone, hair wild, eyes hollow with fury. She stood in the doorway as though nothing had happened. She even smiled, though the smile cracked at the edges. "William," she said softly, almost pleading. I was frightened. The storm, the thunder, it overwhelmed me. I panicked. "Please forgive me. You know how fragile I can be." William's face hardened. Lines of disappointment etched deep into his brow. Fragile. His voice was low, cold. "You nearly killed her, Clara. Do you think I didn't see the vial? Do you think I can forget the words you spoke?" She trembled, but only for show. I saw the spark of hatred still burning in her eyes. "You've been misled," she insisted, her gaze snapping toward me. "She's poisoned you against me. She always hated me. Can't you see, William? This is her revenge." My son looked at her long and hard, then shook his head. "No, the truth is in your own handwriting." He tapped the notebook that never left his pocket now. "You cannot deny what you planned." Clara's face twisted, the mask slipping again. But instead of shouting, she dropped to her knees, clutching at William's hand. "Please, don't ruin me. Don't throw away everything we built. I can change. I can be better. Oh, my loves, do you think snakes ever change? Do you think venom ever turns sweet? Tell me in the comments, for I have lived long enough to know my answer." William said nothing. He pulled his hand from hers and walked past her, his silence more powerful than any words. She followed him with her eyes, and when she turned toward me, her expression was no longer pleading. It was a promise of vengeance. The days that followed were filled with tension sharp enough to cut. Clara became a shadow in the house, drifting from room to room, always watching. Sometimes I would wake in the night to find her standing in the hallway outside my door, her silhouette framed by the moonlight. Other times I caught her staring at William, her eyes calculating, as though plotting her next move. But what she did not know, what she could not have guessed, was that William had already begun unraveling her web. He visited the bank, spoke with the family lawyer, and secured every document she might have twisted to her gain. Quietly, firmly, he built a wall she could no longer breach. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, William came to me with weary eyes. "Mother," he said, his voice breaking, "I don't know how to live with her anymore, but she is my wife. What am I to do?" I laid my trembling hand on his. "My son, marriage is sacred, but not when it becomes a noose around your neck. She has shown her heart, and it is black with greed. If you stay, she will devour you too." He lowered his head, his shoulders heavy with sorrow. "I thought she loved me." "Love does not poison," I whispered. "Love does not wait for death. My darlings, I must pause here and ask, have you ever trusted someone so deeply, only to watch their mask fall and reveal a stranger? Have you felt that knife of betrayal twist inside your chest? Share with me, for stories like mine are not just mine alone. They belong to all who have tasted the bitterness of deception. Clara, sensing her grip slipping, tried new tactics. She cooked elaborate meals, brought flowers into the house, even sang softly while she worked, as though she was some innocent bride again. To outsiders, she might have looked redeemed, but inside these walls, her eyes betrayed her. One night, I overheard her speaking on the telephone in hushed tones. "He doesn't trust me anymore," she whispered, "but the old woman won't last. I just need more time, more patience. Then everything will still be mine." She still believed, even after all that had happened, that she could outweight me. Oh, my loves, If only she knew that greed ages faster than any grandmother's bones. What Clara failed to see was how William himself was changing. Each day, his warmth toward her cooled. His words grew shorter, his gaze more distant. The love she once manipulated had turned to dust. And then came the letter. It arrived on a quiet morning, delivered by hand. William opened it at the breakfast table, his brow furrowing as he read. Then his face turned pale. Without a word, he handed it to me. The letter was from a lawyer, detailing debts Clara had hidden, gambling, lavish purchases, loans taken under false pretenses, all concealed from William until now. My loves, the woman who sought to steal everything had already squandered what she did have. William's face hardened. She not only tried to kill you, Mother, she's been destroying our future all along. The walls of her lies were collapsing, brick by brick, around her. And yet, Clara still clawed, still fought. She begged, she wept. She promised she could repay it all if only William gave her another chance. But my son was no fool anymore. He contacted the authorities. Investigations began, and soon, Clara's nights grew restless, her hands shaky, her eyes darting to every shadow as though the ghosts of her own deeds were hunting her. Oh, my loves, how quickly greed turns to fear. She who once walked these halls with arrogance now scurried like a rat, cornered and trembling. And still, she glared at me. Every glance screamed the same silent curse. If not for you, it would have all been mine. But little did she know, her end was near. Ah, my darlings, if you have stayed with me so far, I must thank you. Your listening hearts are the only comfort I have left in this fragile old age. Please, if my story touches you, do remember to subscribe and share it. Let my voice reach others who may need to hear how even the weakest can survive the cruelest storms. Now listen closely, for Clara's mask was almost gone. After the letter of debts, the house changed again. William kept more distance from Clara than ever before. He spent long hours at the solicitor's office, his footsteps heavy when he returned. Papers shuffled late at night, pens scratched across parchment, and his sighs echoed through the halls. He was disentangling himself from her, strand by strand, like a man cutting free of a spider's web, and Clara felt it. She began to shrink within these walls. No more grand entrances, no more smug laughter. Instead, she crept about quietly, as though the walls themselves judged her. But her eyes never softened. Oh no, my dears. Her heart remained a pit of venom. I remember one evening clearly, the kind of evening when the sky is bruised purple, and the air smells of rain, though no drop has yet fallen. Clara came to my room carrying a tray. Mother, she said sweetly, her voice shaking at the edges. I made you some soup. You must eat something warm. I looked at the bowl, steam rising like ghostly fingers, and I smiled gently. How kind of you. But inside I felt the icy chill of suspicion. Do snakes ever offer kindness without reason? I pretended to sip, letting the spoon clink against the bowl. And then, when her eyes turned away for just a heartbeat, I poured a little of the broth into the potted fern by my window. By morning, the fern was withered, its leaves blackened. So she had not given up after all. Even with her lies crumbling and debts revealed, she still thought poison might succeed where all else failed. Tell me, my loves, what sort of soul does this? What darkness drives a woman to destroy for the sake of gold? Comment your thoughts below, for I wonder if any of you can explain what I never could. The next night, William caught her. He came to my room quietly, his face pale, holding a small vial he had found tucked beneath the floorboard in their chamber. It's the same as before, he whispered, his hand trembling. She hasn't stopped, Mother. She still means to harm you. I took his hand, though mine was shaking too. Then she has already lost my son. For you see her clearly now. She cannot hide. But Clara was desperate. When William confronted her, she lashed out. "You think you can cast me aside? You think your mother will live forever? She's nothing but a withered hag, clinging to life. I deserve this house, this wealth, after all I have endured." Her voice carried through the halls like the scream of a banshee. Neighbors must have heard, though none came knocking. Perhaps they, too, feared the storm inside our walls. William's reply was like a hammer striking stone. "You deserve nothing, Clara. Nothing but the consequences of your own choices." And that, my darlings, was the night William packed her belongings. He placed them in the corridor and told her she could no longer stay. She fought. Oh, how she fought. Tears, threats, even throwing herself at his feet. But his eyes were steel. His heart was broken. Yes, but no longer blind. Clara left the house that night, her footsteps echoing like a curse. Rain began to fall as she crossed the garden path, each drop washing her further from our lives. But fate, my loves, does not let go so easily. Weeks later, whispers reached us. Clara had been seen in the nearby town, wandering the streets, pale and disheveled. Some said she begged at the taverns for coin, others that she sought refuge with strangers. Her debts had swallowed her, her reputation ruined. Even her so-called friends turned their backs. And then, one evening, as William and I sat by the fire in weary peace, a knock thundered at the door. William opened it to find 2 constables standing in the rain. Between them, dishevelled and wild-eyed, was Clara. She looked a shadow of her former self, her clothes torn, her face gaunt. Yet her eyes, oh, those eyes, still glowed with hatred when they fell upon me. "Mr. William," the constable said, "this woman was found wandering near the estate, muttering threats. She was carrying this." He held up another vial, this one half filled with a dark liquid. My heart shivered. My loves, even after all she had lost, Clara's obsession had not dimmed. William's voice was firm as stone. "Take her away. She has no place here anymore." Clara shrieked then, her voice ragged, tearing through the night. "This is my house, mine. She should have been gone long ago. I'll see you both in hell before I give up what's mine." The constables dragged her away as she fought like a demon, her cries fading into the distance. The rain swallowed her, and with it, the last grip of her poison upon our lives. When the door closed, silence filled the house. William collapsed into the chair beside me, his face buried in his hands. "Mother, what have we lived through?" I placed my frail hand upon his back, my eyes burning with tears. "A lesson, my son, a lesson that greed destroys all it touches. But remember this, we survived, and we shall continue to survive, so long as we hold to love, not wealth, my loves. I tell you this with a heart heavy but grateful. Never let gold blind your eyes to the truth. Wealth may glitter, but it cannot warm you at night. Only love can do that. And so, though my body is weary, my spirit rests easier now. The shadows still linger, yes, but the venom is gone. The house breathes again. If my story has held you close tonight, if you have felt my trembling heart through these words, then please, do not forget me. Like this video, share it with those you love, and let me know in the comments. Have you too faced the cruelty of someone you once trusted? For stories, my darlings, live only when they are shared. And mine, though painful, is one I gift to you, so you may never be blinded by a serpent's smile. My darlings, you may think that once the serpent is gone, the garden is safe again. But I must tell you, that is not always so. A serpent leaves behind its shed skin, and sometimes that skin still frightens in the moonlight. Clara was taken away by the constables, her shrieks echoing like some dreadful hymn. William tried to put it from his mind, tried to bury himself in work, in caring for me, in restoring order to the household. But me? Oh, my loves, an old woman does not forget so easily. The silence after her departure was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Rooms she once filled with her restless footsteps, now seemed hollow. Yet when I passed them, I felt a chill, as though her eyes still lingered in the corners. Sometimes at night, I would wake to hear faint creaks in the hallway, and though the house was empty, I swore I could hear her pacing. Perhaps it was only memory, perhaps only fear, or perhaps, my darlings, evil leaves echoes even when the body is gone. What do you think? Tell me in the comments. Do you believe some people leave shadows behind them? One evening, as William sat with me by the fire, the orange glow softening the weariness in his face, he spoke at last. "Mother, I want to sell this house. Start anew somewhere far from here. Too many ghosts walk these halls." My heart ached at the thought. This house, with its creaking floors and ivy-wrapped walls, had been my home for decades. Here I had laughed, wept, and grown old, yet I understood his yearning. He was still young enough to start fresh, to breathe free air unclogged by memories of poison and betrayal. I touched his hand gently. "My son, you must do what your heart demands. Houses are but stone and wood. It is the people within them that matter." He smiled faintly, but I saw the conflict in his eyes, for even he was bound by threads of memory. His childhood laughter, his father's footsteps, the echoes of a happier time. That night, I walked the halls alone, candle in hand, my shadow stretching along the walls, like some bent phantom. Each room whispered to me. The kitchen where I had nearly drunk Clara's broth. The dining room where William first saw her mask slip. The hallway where her screams once shook the plaster. All still alive in memory. And then, as I reached the room she once called her own, I hesitated. The door was shut, but I felt a pull. Not of curiosity, but of something deeper, darker. Slowly, my frail hand turned the handle. The room smelled faintly of her perfume, though weeks had passed. The curtains stirred in the breeze, though the windows were closed, and upon the dressing table, a single object remained. It was a journal, bound in leather, edges worn. I sat upon the bed, my heart hammering, and opened it. Oh, my darlings! What I read chilled me more than any storm. Pages upon pages of Clara's handwriting filled the book. Not only her schemes against me, but entries from long before she wed William. Her words dripped with obsession, with envy, with dreams of grandeur. She had written of marrying wealth since she was a girl, of finding a man she could bend, of erasing any obstacle to her rise. And then I saw the truth. In one entry, dated months before she met William, she had written of me. Yes, me. "The old woman in that house will not live long," she wrote. "Her son is blind with love. All I must do is wait." She had been watching us even then, long before we knew her name. My hands trembled so badly, I nearly dropped the book. To think that she had chosen us, hunted us, planned every step. It was not fate that brought her into our lives. It was design. I closed the journal, my heart heavy with dread. I could not show William. It would break him further to know that the love of his life had stalked him like prey. So I kept the book hidden, tucked away where only my old hands could reach. But I knew, my darlings, I knew that Clara's shadow was not gone. Even if she never set foot in this house again, her obsession had sunk its roots deep. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Life settled into a weary rhythm. William spoke less of leaving the house. We repaired what had been broken, though some cracks remained. And yet, sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I would hear something. A knock upon the window, a whisper in the garden, a shadow too tall, too thin, flitting past the gate. Perhaps it was imagination, or perhaps, my darlings, Clara was still watching. Ah, my loves, how I wish I could tell you the story ended there. That Clara was dragged away, that the house fell silent, and that peace returned to my weary bones. But truth does not always bow to wishes. No, sometimes truth clings. Like a thorn buried deep under the skin, Clara's body may have been taken from the house, but her spirit, oh, her spirit lingered. Or Perhaps it was not spirit, but the stains of memory, so heavy that they pressed upon the walls and seeped into the cracks of the floor. The first sign was small. I had left her journal tucked inside the wardrobe of her old room. One evening, when I gathered the courage to peek again, the journal was no longer where I had hidden it. My hands shook as I searched, pulling aside linens and opening drawers. But it was gone. When I asked William, he looked at me blankly. "I haven't touched that room since she left," he said, his voice tired but steady. Then where had it gone? Who had taken it? Or worse, had Clara somehow returned to reclaim it? That night, I dreamt of her, standing at the foot of my bed, her eyes hollow, her voice hissing, "You cannot silence me. This house is mine." I woke drenched in sweat. The candle burned down to its nub, though I swore I had blown it out before sleep. My loves, do you believe dreams can be more than dreams? Tell me in the comments, for I wonder if age has blurred the line between waking and nightmare for me. Another week passed before the noises began. Footsteps in the corridor late at night, soft but steady, as though someone walked with bare feet across the boards. William dismissed it at first, saying the house had always creaked in the night. But I knew the rhythm of those steps. They were Clara's. One evening, as I sat in the parlor, knitting to keep my hands from trembling, the grandfather clock struck 9, and then I heard it. Whispers, faint but sharp, seeping through the wall. My name spoken low. "Margaret, Margaret." I froze, the needle slipping from my fingers. The voice was hers. Oh yes, my loves. I would know her spiteful tongue anywhere. Yet when I staggered to the hallway, there was nothing, only shadows dancing on the plaster, and the echo of my pounding heart. William grew worried for me. "Mother, you're exhausting yourself with these thoughts," he said gently. "She is gone. You must not let her haunt you." But she did haunt me. Whether in spirit or in memory, I cannot say. One cannot so easily shake off the feeling of being watched. When I tended the garden, I felt eyes upon me from the hedges. When I sat to write letters, I caught movement in the corner of my sight, like the flutter of a dress vanishing around the door, and then came the letter. Delivered by no hand we knew, slipped beneath the door in the dead of night. William found it first. The envelope bore no seal, no name, but inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting, jagged and rushed, made my skin crawl. "You thought you could cast me out, but this house is mine. He is mine. I will not rest until you are gone." William's face turned white as he read it. He crushed the letter in his fist and swore aloud. "She will not torment us any more. I will see to it. But how, my loves? How can one banish a shadow?" The days that followed grew heavier. William hired men to guard the gates, thinking Clara might return in flesh. Yet even they reported strange things. Sounds in the garden at night, the latch of the gate opening though none had passed. Once, one guard claimed he saw a woman in white standing by the fountain, but when he approached, she vanished into mist. By then, even William could not deny it. Clara's presence lingered, one way or another. One night, when the storm winds howled again, shaking the old house to its bones, William sat by my side at the fire. He looked at me with tired eyes older than his years. "Mother," he whispered, "what if she never leaves us? What if she finds a way to come back, again and again?" I took his hand, though my fingers were cold as stone. "Then, my son, we must hold tighter to each other, for greed cannot destroy love, no matter how it claws at the edges. She may linger in the shadows, but she cannot claim what is bound by truth." Yet even as I spoke, I wondered, could I be certain? For that very night, as I lay in bed, I heard the door creak open, slowly, silently. My heart seized in my chest. I dared not move, and then, oh my loves, I swear this upon all that I am, I felt a weight upon the bed, the mattress sinking as though another body had sat beside me. A whisper brushed against my ear. "You should have died." I cried out, fumbling for the lamp, but when the flame lit the room, it was empty. Only my ragged breath filled the silence. Do you believe me, my darlings? Or do you think age has made me foolish? Tell me in the comments, for I must know if I am losing myself, or if Clara truly lingers. The days grew colder after that. William avoided speaking of her, but I saw the same dread in his eyes. He too heard the footsteps now. He too felt the drafts that came from nowhere, the doors that opened of their own accord. He tried to protect me, but how does one guard against something unseen? I sometimes wonder if the house itself drank her poison, if the very walls, once warm with laughter, now throb with her venom, echoing her hunger for inheritance. And so, my loves, I sit here by the fire, my voice trembling as I share these words with you. Clara may be gone in flesh, but she is not gone in spirit. She circles us still, a shadow bound to greed, a ghost of her own making. Do not be fooled, my darlings. Some battles do not end when the enemy is cast out. Some wars linger in whispers, in echoes, in shadows that never fade. And I, Margaret, an old woman clinging to her last breaths, wonder if my story will ever truly find its end. But I will tell it to you, piece by piece, so that when my voice is no more, it will live on through yours. Remember me, remember my warning, beware the smile that hides a serpent's fangs. My darlings, I thought I had seen the worst of Clara's cruelty when she was dragged from our home, shrieking like some wild banshee. But you see, poison is not so easily washed away. It does not simply live in the cup, nor in the broth. No, it lingers in the soul. It lingers in trust shattered, in wounds unseen. And though she was gone, the venom she poured into our lives kept spreading. The court hearings came swiftly. I was too frail to attend, but William did, carrying the weight of our family's shame upon his shoulders. He came home pale, exhausted, his jaw tight as stone. She pleaded innocence. He told me one night, his voice hoarse. She cried before the judge, said you were senile, that you imagined it all. Ah, my loves, do you know what it feels like to be called mad? To have your truth twisted into delusion. I clutched his hand, though it trembled in mine. And did they believe her? I whispered. His eyes darkened. Not with the journal, not with the evidence. Yes, the journal I had found, those dreadful pages dripping with her schemes, was brought forth. It sealed her fate. Clara was sentenced, not to death, for England no longer swung the gallows as it once did, but to a cold prison cell where her beauty would wither and her charm would fall on deaf ears. Yet even with justice served, there was no peace. My son would sit by the fire, staring into the flames as though searching for her face in the embers. Sometimes he cursed her name. Sometimes he whispered it like a prayer. Love does not simply vanish, even when betrayed. It leaves behind a scar that throbs with every heartbeat. And me? I found myself listening to the silence of the house. Every creak, every sigh of the wind against the glass felt like her. At night, I would dream of her standing at the foot of my bed, her eyes glinting with malice, her lips curved in that sly smile. I would wake gasping, the taste of iron in my mouth, as though her poison still lingered on my tongue. Tell me, my dears, have you ever loved someone who turned out to be a serpent in disguise? Share your stories in the comments. I read them all, and they remind me I am not alone. And if my tale grips your heart, do not forget to press that little bell, so you never miss when I return to whisper again. William began to speak of leaving again, but his words were hollow. He could not bear to abandon me, and I could not bear to see him wander the world like a broken man. So we stayed. We stayed in this house where joy once lived. now haunted by echoes of betrayal. But here is where the tale twists, my loves. For though Clara was gone, and though her prison was miles away, the poison did not end. It began subtly, a rose from the garden wilting overnight, a loaf of bread turning sour before its time. Small things, easy to dismiss, but then came the letters. One morning, William found an envelope upon the step. No stamp, no seal, only his name scrawled in a familiar hand. Inside, a single sheet of paper, 6 words, written with the grace of a woman we both knew too well. I will return for what is mine. My darling, my heart near stopped. William tore it to shreds and cast it into the fire, his face pale with fury. It is nonsense, he spat. A cruel prank. She cannot have written it, but in my heart I knew. I knew her hand, her flourish. Clara had not let go, even behind prison walls. Her obsession reached for us like a vine. That night, as the wind howled against the shutters, I whispered a prayer, but my prayers felt heavy, as though weighed down by doubt. Could the prison truly hold a soul so restless, so hungry, or had she found a way to reach us, even from afar? Sometimes I think the world of the living and the world of the damned are not so far apart. Sometimes the two bleed together. My darlings, I told myself that a letter was but paper, that ink could not harm me, that fire had swallowed her words whole. Yet as I sat alone in the parlor that evening, the shadows long and restless, I could not shake the feeling that Clara's voice whispered from the very ashes in the hearth. I will return, it seemed to murmur. I will return, and return in some form. She did. It began with footsteps. Oh, not William's. His tread I knew well, heavy, weary, dragging with the weight of sleepless nights. No, these were lighter, sharper, almost feline. In the dead of night, I would hear them on the landing, pausing outside my door. My heart would hammer, and I would clutch the blanket to my chest, whispering, "It is imagination, nothing more." But when morning came, faint prints marked the dust near my threshold. A woman's prints, slim, pointed. I dared not tell William. His mind was already fraying. He drank more than before, sitting with his head in his hands, muttering her name as though it were both curse and prayer. Once, I found him in her old room, the journal I had hidden clutched in his hands. His eyes were wild. "Why did you keep this from me?" he demanded. I could not answer. My silence was guilt enough. He hurled the book across the room, pages fluttering like black wings, and stormed past me. That was the first time I felt I might lose him. Not to Clara's love, but to her ghost. One evening, he did not come home until dawn. His boots were muddied, his eyes bloodshot. He sank into a chair, staring into nothingness. When I asked where he had been, he whispered, "I thought I saw her. Oh, my loves, do you see now how poison lingers? Not in broth, not in bread, but in memory." She haunted his waking hours, stalked his dreams, wore him thin as parchment. And yet, perhaps it was not only memory, for soon after, more letters arrived, always slipped beneath the door, never marked by post, each in her hand, each dripping with venom. "You cannot lock me away. I am closer than you think. The house is mine. The fortune is mine. He is mine." William burned them all, but not before reading them over and over, as though trying to hear her voice through the words. His torment grew, and mine with it, for if Clara was truly reaching from her prison, how, unless someone here, in this very town, was helping her? Sometimes when I dared look from the upstairs window, I thought I saw her, a figure by the gate, her dress pale against the dark hedges. But when I blinked, she was gone. My darlings, do you believe in hauntings? Tell me in the comments. Is it the dead who walk, or the living shadows of those who wish us harm? I wonder still. And if my tale grips your heart, do not forget to press like, share it with your dearest, and let others hear the whispers of an old woman's truth. One night I was awoken by a crash. My heart near stopped as I rose, candle trembling in my hand. Down the stairs I crept, each board groaning beneath my weight. In the kitchen, the window was wide open, the cold air biting. A vase lay shattered on the floor, its water seeping into the cracks, and upon the counter a single rose rested. Not from our garden. No, it bore a ribbon I knew well, Clara's ribbon. I staggered back, clutching my chest.
Someone had been inside.
Someone bold enough to leave me this token, like a hunter marking her prey. When William saw it, he paled. He swore to bolt every door, to watch the house through the night. But he could not watch his mind. His grief and guilt gnawed at him. He grew thin, hollow-eyed, speaking less each day. Sometimes I would catch him gazing into the mirror, whispering as though she stood behind him. It was then I knew, if this went on, I would lose him. Not to Clara's hand, but to her shadow. And so, my darlings, I resolved to uncover the truth myself. Whether it was her spirit walking, or some accomplice carrying her venom into our home, I would face it. For an old woman may be frail in body, but she grows strong in will, and if I had survived Clara's poison once, I would not let her destroy what little family I had left. Oh, my dears, if you have sat with me through these nights of terror, I cannot thank you enough. Your patience steadies my hands as much as the shawl around my shoulders. Now listen close, for I took matters into my own trembling hands. Not because I am fearless, heavens no, but because fear without action eats the heart away. If you find yourself whispering, "Good on you, Margaret," press that little like button. And if you haven't yet, subscribe so you'll hear how the rest of this crooked road untangles. I would have wanted company through it all. I began where any sensible woman, with nothing left to lose, begins. With questions. I started small, asking the baker if anyone had come by late, asking strange things. I asked the milkman if he'd seen a pale woman standing by our gate. I even went trembling to the little grocer by the station and mentioned Clara's name as though it were nothing. A hint, a rumor, and watched their faces. People look guilty when they have secrets. You learn that with old age. You learn to read the twitch of a lip, the blink that lasts too long. Most said nothing. A few shook their heads and muttered that the prisons held their own dangers, and Clara could not reach out of stone and iron. But one woman, Mrs. Larkin, who lived across the lane and had the keenest eyes in the village, took me by the hand and said softly, "Margaret, don't be a fool. There are ways a determined woman can reach any place she wants. We know people. We know whispers." Her voice was small but fierce. She told me, in that slow, careful manner of someone who weighs each word, that prisoners sometimes buy favors, that messages can be slipped through visiting rooms, that grudges grow like ivy and find cracks in stone. This listen to little litany of possibilities set me moving. I began to keep a notebook of my own. My old ledger, the one with my husband's ink stains on the corner. I wrote down each knocked window, each missing page, each letter burned in the hearth. I recorded the footsteps on the landing, the rose left on the counter. I wrote it all not only for William but for myself, because putting things down makes them less monstrous, less likely to coil around your mind like mist. One afternoon, as I sat at the long kitchen table mending a sleeve, there was a timid knock, and then the postman's boy stood on our doorstep, hat in hand. He looked embarrassed. He handed William a padded envelope with no return address. William's fingers trembled as he opened it. Inside was a photograph of a woman leaning against a lamppost in town, her face turned away. On the back, written in a hurried hand, were 2 words, "She watches." It was Clara. the braid of her hair, the way her shoulders hunched against the cold. I knew them like the lines on my hand. William crushed the picture, as though to squeeze the memory out of his mind. "Who sent this?" he demanded of the boy. The boy shrugged. "No name, sir. I found it tucked under the flour sack on my route this morning." He dared not meet our eyes. We had enough now to understand that someone, or several someones, kept feeding her presence to us. But who? That question gnawed at me until the gnawing turned to action. I started to watch the staff more carefully. The gardener who came on Tuesdays, the woman who cleaned every Wednesday, the butcher who delivered on Friday. One could gain much by watching other people's habits. Silence has a rhythm of its own, and I learned to hear it on a wet Tuesday as the garden smelled of turned soil. I saw the gardener, Thomas, linger longer than usual at the gate. His hands were dirty as always, but there was a furtiveness in the way he glanced back at the lane. He caught my eye and reddened. I called him over with the same coaxing voice I used as a young mother, the voice that had soothed 100 scraped knees. "Tom, love, a small word," I asked. He came near, shifting his rake like a man resisting his own confession. "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore. People have been calling, lad. People leave roses and letters. Have you seen anyone strange?" I asked, keeping my voice mild. He swallowed. Then, as though relieving himself of a weight, he nodded. "There's been a woman in the lane at odd hours. Not often, but twice now. She speaks to me when I slope the hedges. Says she's looking for work. I told her to go to the station, but she said she had friends here." His eyes flitted away. "She left a little parcel for you once, when she said you weren't home. I thought nothing of it then, but... Well, she always leaves before I can catch her, Mrs. Whitmore." My heart tightened. "Did she say her name?" He thought a long moment. "No, ma'am, but she has a way of humming a tune that sounds like the one Clara used to hum. I should have told you sooner." There it was, a thread to pull. I thanked him gently and gave him a shilling I had in my pocket for his curiosity. Little things buy you bigger truth sometimes. That night, while William slept, or tried to, I slipped into the lane. I know how it sounds. An old woman sneaking about like some spy in the dark. But desperation makes one bold. The fog hugged the hedges. My shawl wrapped around me like armor. I walked to the place Thomas had said, behind the grocer's store, where the back path met the lane. There I crouched in the damp bracken and waited. My knees cried with each cough, but I held my breath like a child waiting for a story. Hours passed. A fox barked distantly, and then, like a silhouette in a picture, a woman appeared. She moved with a practiced stealth that could have been learned in 1,000 furtive walks. Her coat was too thin for the cold. Her gait had a weary wear that spoke of nights spent without rest. She stopped beneath the lamplight and sang, very softly, some half-forgotten melody that tugged at my bones because I had heard it before. Clara's mocking tune. My first instinct was rage. I wanted to charge, to seize her by the sleeve and demand why she breathed upon our household's air. But my second instinct, the better one, was patience. I watched her. She drew from her coat a small packet and tucked it beneath the bench. She whispered aloud, not words I could hear distinctly, but a cadence of duty. Then she walked away, the same way she had come, disappearing into the fog. I waited until the footsteps faded and then went to the bench. The packet was wrapped in brown paper, damp at the edges. Inside was a scrap of paper and a small loop of ribbon. The same ribbon from the rose left on our kitchen counter. The scrap named a place, the green shed behind St. Mark's, a rendezvous, a drop for Clara's couriers. I clutched the scrap so tight it creased like a prayer card and slipped it into my apron. That night I barely slept. I did not tell William. How could I? He would have been at me to call the constables, to bring men with lanterns and loud voices. But I had learned that visibility can scatter only the visible parts of a plan. We needed to catch the unseen, so I planned, slowly, as one stitches a quilt, with neat, precise motions and patience. The next afternoon, disguised by an old hood and long coat, I made my way to St. Mark's, pretending the walk was for the sake of my knees. The shed stood at the back, leaning like an apologetic neighbor. I crept close, heard a drum, and peered through a crack in the wood. Inside, a small crowd murmured. 2 women, a thin man with a ringed finger, and a boy who looked too young for such ugly errands. They were passing something back and forth. Letters, coins, a folded sheet with Clara's handwriting. One woman held a photograph of us and laughed in a small, cruel way that set my teeth on edge. I must have made some sound, a twig snapping under my foot, for the woman with the laugh turned toward the crack. Her eyes met mine as though she could see me through the wood. For a breathless second, our gazes locked, and I saw recognition blazing like a lantern. She mouthed a single word, "Grandmother," and she snapped the shed door shut. I slipped back into the lane and walked home as the sky bruised toward evening. The walk felt like wading through molasses. My legs were lead, my heart a riot in my chest. The knowledge I had was both a victory and a terror. We were not alone in this. Clara had people, helpers who carried her spite like parcels across our town. I told William the next day in a way that kept him steady. I could not give him all the details. I had to be cautious. But when I offered him the scrap and my shaky account of the shed, his face turned white as the tablecloth. He took to his boots like a ghost, a man who finally had a task that was not only grief. He alerted Mr. Harding, the solicitor, and together they arranged discreet watchers. Thomas the gardener, who had a conscience, the postman's boy who owed our family favors, and a sober constable who did not much like noise, but liked fairness. We did not confront them in thunder. We caught them in the dim, when the town seemed to hold its breath. The sheds at St. Mark's opened to reveal startled faces bathed in torchlight. Letters and trinkets fell like ashamed confessions to the floor. The woman who had mouthed "grandmother" now stood before me, cheeks flushed with the cold and fear. She was young, younger than Clara in some ways, desperate in others. When confronted, she crumbled like biscuit. She promised me work, she said through teary breaths. She promised she would send for my boy. She said only a few messages, nothing more. Forgive me. I needed it. Forgive her? My heart softened and then snapped. People bend under pressure. Some break. I felt anger at Clara for using human hunger like a hook. And sorrow, immense sorrow, for the way greed coerced others into its service. We gathered the scraps, the photographs, the ribbons, each piece stitched together Clara's network. A handful of townsfolk, a petty criminal or two who fancied themselves noble for helping a woman of charm, and a young mother who had been fooled into thinking Clara would help her son. They were not monsters in the grand theatrical sense. They were frightened and foolish, and 2 or 3 of them regretting. The constable took statements. Mr. Harding typed stern letters. William, with his face carved by sorrow and a deep new steel, arranged for the young mother to be aided so she would not need Clara's false promises again. I felt relief and an ache that was not comfort, for the poison had been more widespread than I had thought. Clara had not only threatened our hearth, she had reached into the seams of the village. Do you see, my loves, how these things work? A serpent coaxes, and people bite, but when enough light shines, the serpent's scales are revealed. We had pulled a few of them loose from their hiding places. For now, the stream of letters slowed. For now, the roses stopped appearing on my counter. Yet I will not pretend we were safe. Clara's reach had thinned, not snapped. She might still find other hands to do her bidding. But in those days of small victories, I learned a truth that warmed me more than tea ever had. Courage does not roar in fire. It knits quietly. patient as winter stitching itself into spring. And sometimes, that quiet is enough. If you have felt your own house haunted by a whisper or a shadow, tell me about it in the comments. Your words keep my voice alive. And remember, if you have sat with Margaret this long, press subscribe and share this story with someone who must know. Never let a smile close to you. Hide a plan against your heart.